Hello and welcome back to Perspectives, bringing you our daily dose of news and views, covering the topics we hope are relevant to you. Well, today, the poison of right-wing disinformation spreads again. A major landmark legal ruling for Sikhs in the US. And we look at how the evils of the caste system are now coming into increasing question in India. And as the dust settles after the Calgary referendum, a clearly worried India fires another broadside at Canada once again. So joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our amazing viewers out there. I didn't forget to shave. I've actually got a movie role coming up, so I gotta kind of have the stubble this week.
Great to see you, James. And of course, James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. Of course, as always, we'll be taking a look at your great comments, which have been coming in by the bucketfuls, as always. Thank you so much for those. So let us move on with the show. James, what have you got to start us off with today?
Well, we have a few things here. And first of all, I thought that we would take a quick peek back. Well, both actually have to do with the Calgary referendum. And right now, I'm going to bring up our first story here about the family of Dilawar Singh Babbar. And he had, there we go, his family was actually the first to cast their votes in Calgary. And a lot of people are asking, well, who is this person? So I thought that because he is a very important figure and martyr for the Sikh cause in the referendum for Khalistan, going back several decades now, I thought that we would just take a quick peek to look and see who it is, and so that people who may be younger and not know, or for our English and Western viewers who maybe are just learning with us about Sikh culture and history, I thought I would touch on this. So again, they were the first individuals to vote in Calgary at the referendum. And Shaheed Dilawar Singh Babbar Jai, and that's the full name here, quite the mouthful for me. But he was also known as the human bomb who assassinated the Punjab Chief Minister Beant Singh in August of 1995. Here is a photo that I was able to pull up on the internet. The internet's a powerful tool for us in research and finding information. But let's just go through this bit of article that I wrote, and you can always pause your screen and read through it yourself if you wish as well, because I'm not going to read it word for word. I'm just going to go over some of the highlights and some of the important points here. Now, he assassinated Beant Singh by blowing up his bulletproof car at 5 p.m. on the 31st of August in 1995. And I'm just going to scroll down here because we do have a picture of that. And again, this is from Archives Online. So that's why it was very important for his family to be there to represent and to vote in the Khalistan referendum. Now, he was he was the one who assassinated the Chief Minister of Punjab, and he was a Punjab police officer and became a suicide bomber to assassinate the Chief Minister. He assassinated him, as I said, on that date and location in the city of Chandigarh. And this was in response to other things that have been going on. So let's take a look at that. In Punjab between 1992 and 1995, at a time when the Khalistan movement was active in the state and the India government was aggressively seeking to control the movement during Beant Singh's tenure, many innocent Sikhs were killed unlawfully. As per Asian Human Rights Commission, they stated the Congress government under Chief Minister Beant Singh created a situation where even subordinate police officers became the judge, jury, and executioner of innocent people. Sikh boys were picked up from their houses or fields and taken blindfolded to isolated places and told to run. A burst of AK-47 rifle fire ended their lives. Such was the terror that nobody dared ask why. Not even a single member of the police force was hit in the crossfire. Many members of the police force in Punjab got out-of-turn promotions, gallantry towards awards, and monetary rewards for killing innocent peoples. Dilawar Singh, who was a police constable at the time, conspired with Balwant Singh Rojana, a police officer, to kill Beant Singh. The attack on the 31st of August of 1995 resulted in the death of Beant Singh. Dilawar Singh and 17 others. And on 25th of December 1997, backup police officer Rojana confessed his involvement while blaming the Indian government that it had murdered its own people and promoted and honored the killing of Sikhs. Okay, so it goes on there to talk about the rape, abductions, the secret cremations, and so forth, which have gone unpunished even till today. Now, this individual was found guilty in the courts and sentenced to death. He did not appeal the decision because he felt that would take away from the whole idea that he was speaking out and acting to get the international attention against all of these atrocities and human rights violations that were going on. He felt that by being a national martyr that he had the obligation to follow through, and if that meant losing his life as a result of standing proud and standing tall and standing bravely in the face of injustice, then that's what he was going to do. So again, you can take a look at this article here by just scrolling slowly on your screen, and that again will give you the opportunity to learn a bit. But I encourage you to actually do some deep dives online and read more, because it's very fascinating information about the struggles and the people who have stood their ground to defend the Sikh people, to defend democracy and human rights, and to defend people of all nationalities, all races, all beliefs. And it was because of these atrocities and the arbitrary killing of innocent children and adults by the Indian government and sanctioned by them that these events happened. So that is, in a nutshell, who he was. And I just wanted to also just remind people that also in attendance was the family of another martyr for the Khalistan referendum and the Khalistan vote. And that, of course, was the family of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, who was the leader of the Surrey Gurdwara here in my local community. But more than that, he was a leader in the entire community, not just for Sikhs, but for everyone, in bringing peace, trying to bring a level of crime down by being available to all people and to raise awareness of issues that were impacting the community as a whole, not just the Sikh community. So he was an incredible man doing incredible work, and it was a tragic loss, but his family honored him by being at the Calgary event to support others placing their votes. And this is Hardeep Singh's brother, and I'm sorry, forgive me, I don't recall his name offhand. But again, it just shows how powerful the vote was, the referendum movement. And with Modi claiming that it is just a fringe movement, it's also interesting to note that over 1 million people have now voted in the referendum around the world. The next event will take place, I believe it is August, around the 15th, and that will be in New Zealand. So we'll find out and keep you updated on more information as that comes to us. And hopefully people in New Zealand will get out and have their voices heard as well. Democracy is a beautiful thing when it's protected, and human rights are a given. Once again, they are human rights, not suggestions, but rights. And that's what, we seem to be missing for some countries, not understanding that in some world leaders. So I'll throw that back to you for your thoughts there, Angus, and then we'll move on to the next story.
Yes, thank you, James. Interesting. And we must remember there is a whole generation of people who weren't even born when Dilawar Singh was martyred. And it is important that these stories are kept alive, that their sacrifices are reminded to a whole generation of people who might not be aware of, or at least have some vague awareness of their their community history, but not enough detail. And it is important that the detail and the context of why these incidents happened and why these men were martyred, they need to be aware of this. And if we just take a quick summary at the context of why Dilawar Singh became a Shaheed, became a martyr. In post-partition, the Punjab was betrayed in many ways. The Sikh community was massively betrayed by the British and then the subsequent Brahmins of India. And of course, the Punjab was then further divided. And again, the rights of the Punjabi Sikhs were eroded decade after decade. And all they asked for was simple, their basic human rights, their rights to access to even just their simple riparian rights, the rights to the access to their own water within their own state to feed their crops, etc. So the whole movement just came from a simple human rights, a demand for basic human rights. And of course, the Indian government pushed back on this and they forced the Sikh community into a corner. And that, of course, led up to Operation Blue Star, where clearly Indira Gandhi wanted to really wrap this up in one simple, brutal tactic. And that, of course, ended up in Operation Blue Star and the massacre, the genocide that followed that, which in turn led to her own assassination and, of course, the genocide, the Sikh genocide, in the latter part of 1984. So what had begun as a simple human rights movement ended up basically in a full-scale war. And a war perpetrated by one side. And the Punjabi Sikhs essentially became the defendants. They were the innocent victims of this war, of the aggressive Indian state. They had no choice but to fight back. And the Shaheed of Bhindranvali in 1984 and all the others who gave their lives in Amritsar in the events of June 1984 stood as that nexus point, as that key point when the real fight back began. And of course, throughout the 1980s and the 1990s, the early part of the 1990s, the whole of the Sikh, or the large part of the Sikh population had no choice but to try and fight back because they were suddenly the result of brutality never known before in India. Such brutality meted out by the state itself, by the police force, by the army, the law enforcement, those people who should be controlling society, keeping law and order intact. They were the ones taking a whole generation of young Sikhs out into the countryside and shooting them, killing them, and then burying their bodies, cremating their bodies. A whole generation almost disappeared throughout this decade and a half through extrajudicial killings. So, of course, the Sikhs had no choice but to fight back in any way they were able to. And yeah, so that James, the context of this, as you rightly point out, how desperate must a human being be to blow himself up just to make a point, to highlight how terrible his community's plight is, and to take out one of the chief perpetrators of this, the Chief Minister, Singh of the Punjab. Well done to the Shaheed. He certainly made his mark and he took out one of the key perpetrators of this. And it is right that Shaheeds like this gentleman are honoured year after year, decade after decade, and the young generation are made aware. They must read about martyrs like this. They must read why this happened. So, James, yeah, a very powerful story. Thank you for bringing that one up.
Absolutely. And just as a side note, of course, we don't promote violence. We don't promote this type of action. But you have to look back at the times that they were, and it's a whole different world than what we in the Western world can comprehend. Something that we've never had to go through. The closest thing that we can equate it to would be the long struggles with the IRA and in Ireland and, things to that nature. But even they are a lot different. So it's like comparing apples to oranges. But again, it was a different time, and it was also a very desperate time for the Sikhs because they were under fire. They were being, just slaughtered by the government and officials. So again, it was just a side note to, we don't promote the violence, but at the same time, it was a different era. And if you have to look at how civil wars happened, and such, you have to take it into the context in which it was. Something, again, we in the Western world cannot really comprehend.
And if I can just add one more point in there, James, is that, of course, these events happened, 30 plus years ago, but they still impact today directly. Right. Because, of course, many of the perpetrators, many of the guilty behind these dreadful atrocities, these crimes, are still alive and are still free. And people like Jagtar Singh Johal actually kept documentation, kept records, did research to find and track down those who were guilty of these terrible crimes. And what's happened to Jagtar Singh Johal? The current Indian government has imprisoned him for highlighting these things. So even today, India remains equally guilty. The Indian establishment is equally guilty as those who were guilty in the 1980s and 90s. They are basically covering up the evidence. They are hiding the guilty, and for that they are implicated in the crimes of the 1980s and 1990s. So even today, those crimes still resonate and still impact those alive today. Thank you, James.
Yes, and just an even stronger reason why it was so important that his family be able to cast the first votes in Calgary. So again, respect to them for being there and to all of the other families who have suffered losses and shown up. Now, with that said, we're going to go into a bit of a different area because Angus and I both discuss how the Indian media likes to take the facts and bring them to a different perspective for themselves to benefit their propaganda. So I thought that we would take a quick peek at how one of the Indian online news sources, this is the India Blooms news service, and I thought we'd just take a look at how they reported on the Khalistan referendum in Calgary. Excuse me, sorry about that. And so let's take a look at the article that they wrote, and then I'll just touch on a few points. The US-based organization Sikhs for Justice has sparked significant controversy by dedicating today's Khalistan referendum at Calgary City Hall to Talwinder Singh Parmar, the co-conspirator of Canada's deadliest terror attack. Parmar was instrumental in the 1985 Air India bombing, which resulted in the tragic loss of 329 lives, and I will get back to this in just a moment. Calgary Mayor Gondik has come under fire for her handling of the situation. Critics argue that she could have passed a bylaw to prohibit the glorification of terrorists, a measure they claim she reserves for her political opponents rather than her main voting base. Now, what she did is respected and upheld human rights and our Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Canada, that the space is available for everyone, all citizens, all residents. So yeah, it had nothing to do with the glorification of anybody. And it goes on here to say that the preparations for the referendum included setting up large tents and barricades at City Hall, leading to public outcry. A former Sikh community member expressed his dismay, stating, "I think it's a terrible and shameful that these extremists have been given a public space and public resources to put on their terrorist convention." I mean, come on now. It is a peaceful, non-binding referendum that people were just in big smiles and happy to be there, happy to have the freedom to have their voices heard through this. In no way was it at all something to promote terrorism. I was there, I can tell you. The event's dedication to Parmar and other martyrs of the Khalistan movement has further fueled the controversy. Many view the referendum as an endorsement of violence and extremism, questioning the city's and the Canadian government's stance on such activities. Now, this gets interesting here. The Canadian government's insensitivity has reached alarming levels by allowing an extremist organization to glorify and celebrate a terrorist. Talwinder Singh Parmar, who orchestrated, again, the Air India bombings and so forth, is being venerated in a public space with apparent government acquiescence. The decision blatantly disregards the trauma and grief of the victims' families, failing to honor the memory of those who perished in one of Canada's deadliest terror attacks. How could the authorities overlook the pain and innocent lives lost of the grieving loved ones, allowing such a reprehensible display to proceed? Now, it goes on as well to say the issue raises broader concerns about the inconsistency in how terrorist activities are labeled and handled in Canada. Critics point out that while Canadian administration swiftly condemns groups like Hamas as terrorist organization, it appears more lenient towards Khalistan extremists. The perceived double standard has led to accusations of vote bank politics, influencing Calgary's policies and making the city a haven for foreign organizations with extremist agendas. And it closes out by saying, as the debate continues, the Calgary community remains deeply divided, grappling with the implications of allowing such events to take place on public grounds. The controversy highlights the ongoing struggle between maintaining public safety and upholding freedoms, a balance that cities across the world continually strive to achieve. Now let's take a look at that. Okay, the public safety was absolutely in no way, shape, or form at threat here. It was a peaceful, and I mean very peaceful and loving event that the Sikh community came out and they placed their votes. They shared food. They shared conversation. They welcomed in members of the homeless and downtrodden community that were around to have meals. They gave them water and other beverages. And, there was nothing but just a positive attitude by everybody there, except for, a few people that tried to disrupt the event. But again, that had nothing to do with the Khalistan referendum or the people there. It was people from outside trying to stir things up. Now, I also wanted to come back to Mr. Parmar. Now, let's take a look at what we know. There were certain individuals that were arrested and charged with the conspiracy and the bombing of Air India. It was a horrific event. It was one of the worst terror attacks in Canadian history, and one that I personally will never forget. And like many others that grieve and still grieve the loss of life, regardless as to who the lives were, where they were from, and what they believed in. This was also a very important part of Canadian history because we still don't know all of the facts. There was evidence that mysteriously disappeared while in control and care by the RCMP and CSIS. There were government documents now that have come out that plainly and clearly ordered CSIS and the RCMP to not include the government of India into the investigation. So there are questions about whether or not these individuals were just patsies played by the India government who were operating, as we've seen recently, on foreign soil and trying to make the Sikh movement for Khalistan and Sikhs in general to be the bad guys, the big bad wolf at your door, as the India government would like them to be seen. So there's a lot of questions that need to be answered. And unfortunately, it comes at the great pain and discomfort of the victims of Air India. That was a tragic event, and people are going to be opening up old wounds by this being reinvestigated and trying to get to the bottom of it. But I think that at the end of the day, it needs to be done. We need to know the truth about how the India government was involved in it and why the governments of the day ordered and persuaded investigators to not include the India government or their representatives in the investigation. That is something that a lot of people are unaware of. And I think it's a very important point and something that people need to open their eyes and learn about. Further to that, I know that there was an individual when I was going to school in Burnaby, British Columbia. I'm not going to name the individual, but I will say that he was related to Mr. Parmar. But he went through hell as a kid in elementary school. We saw where some people, because of the name and because of what had happened, he was really ostracized, and it wasn't his involvement in this. It wasn't him that did anything, and it wasn't him that the Indian government or others were trying to paint as a bad guy, but I mean, just a kid, and he suffered at the hands of people because of misinformation and misunderstandings, and again, it was just a horrible thing. So I don't know where he is today, the son, but I hope that he is doing well and living a great life in whatever field or area of life that he went into. And again, that was when we went to Capitol Hill Elementary when we were kids. So it just shows, though, how misinformation, whether it's children, adults, or others, from government or anywhere else, can really sway the public opinion and contribute to the distortion of facts. And that's, I think, the important part, is that we really need to get to the facts and not have just a biased, unresolved issue lingering in the public eye. And so, with that, I mean, again, it was a terrible event. We're not taking anything away from the victims and the lives lost and the tragedy that it was, but it also is important that we see the reality and we get to the truth of it. I'll send that back to you, Angus.
Yes, two topics, I think, in this story. The first, of course, is Air India, and the second is of course, the misinformation. This article, reading this article, I laugh, and I shouldn't laugh because it's serious. But you read the Indian narrative, you read this nonsense. I mean, you can almost see in a journalist's office somewhere in Delhi, so somebody's got their boss leaning over their shoulder saying, no, make it more emotive, make it more anti-Khalistan, use more emotive terms. And those emotive terms come out almost in every other sentence. They talk about terrorists, they talk about extremists, they talk about, Calgary is such a divided society over this topic. Canada is so divided because they've got these terrorists living amongst them. They've got these extremists. Well, the reality on the ground is clearly totally different. This is not true. It is such a manufactured narrative. The Khalistani community and the Sikh community in Canada are a very successful, very high net contributing part of Canadian society. They have succeeded in many areas of business and commerce. They contribute enormously to Canadian society. They are not extremists, and they're most certainly not terrorists. And this whole narrative about double standards of Canadian law enforcement, where, we'll label Hamas as terrorists, but we won't label those nasty, dangerous Khalistanis as terrorists. Well, simply because they're not terrorists. Canada is ruled by the rule of law. It is governed by a very comprehensive, mature legal system. It is not naive and stupid enough and politically infiltrated enough to differentiate Khalistanis and say, for political reasons, let's forget those terrorists. Let's let them carry on with their terrorist activity. It doesn't work like that in a modern democracy. I'm sorry, India. So this whole narrative is laughable. It is risible. It is completely manufactured, and I laugh about it because it is that transparent. It is that obvious. But, of course, a lot of people read these articles, particularly in India, and they believe what they read. And this is why dangerous articles like this are so powerful. And using emotive language like this is so dangerous. It's very sad to see. The other issue, of course, is Air India, and we won't go into too much detail on that because we are time pressed. But absolutely, we have talked about it. We've touched upon it on many occasions. Clearly, there is a much bigger story behind this. There has been a very interesting book written about this, Soft Target, which details a huge amount of evidence pointing to the fact that it is most likely that the Indian intelligence services were behind this whole act of terrorism. It was designed very deliberately at a time that we've just talked about in the 1980s, when they were desperate to smear the Sikh community as a bunch of terrorists, dangerous terrorists, and a danger to modern society. They would do anything. They would sink to any depth to turn public opinion against the Sikh community, particularly the Sikh diaspora who had fled the persecution and the murder by the state in the Punjab. So it's very clear. And loads of evidence has emerged since, including loads of high-ranking Indian officials who did not set foot on that flight, who were booked on that flight, but suddenly, a few days before, cancelled their tickets. Several high-ranking Indians cancelled their tickets on that very one flight, very suspiciously, etc., etc. And the news goes on. So James, fascinating story from a simple article. It implies an awful lot. Thanks for that one.
Absolutely. And just as a closing word on that, I would like to say that I don't think the world would have issue with Hamas if they were just out there having referendums and fighting for human rights in a peaceful way. So, to compare the two is just an insult to my intelligence and to the intelligence of any other person with common sense that reads the article and does the research.
Yeah, it's a direct insult to the wonderful men, women and children who were there in Calgary who you met on the occasion.
That's right.
So, Yeah, okay, let's move on. And disinformation is the topic of the day. So, doing the rounds on social media. Social media is always awash with terrible information and terrible misinformation. It is a platform that allows right-wing extremists to perpetuate all sorts of myths and false narratives. Now, I'm showing here a photo that has been doing the rounds over the last few days on social media. And it was spread by a well-known right-wing propagandist, a guy called Harrison Faulkner. And the image, which is pretty appalling, shows an elderly gentleman in a petrol station in Brampton, in Canada. Now, this image has been viewed 3.2 million times as of the time that I took this snapshot. And yeah, it's a bit shocking, isn't it? But as it turns out, it's not true.
It's disgusting.
It's been photoshopped. And the guy who actually owns this location is a Sikh himself, a gentleman called Raj Growal. And he posted up on Twitter, he said, hang on a second, I own this property. This did not happen. It's photoshopped. Do better, Harry Faulkner. So, yeah, here we have a very typical tactic run by the right wing. And this has actually come from an anti-immigration element of the right wing. Clearly, in all countries in the West, we have quite strong extremist right-wing elements who are really anti-immigration and who are deeply racist. And we talked about this. It's a very sensitive subject because the right wing is made up of different factions. At the extreme end, you've got the right wing anti-immigration racists, and then on the just right of centre, and actually, in fact, it's not even just right of centre, even some on the left, are anti-immigration, which is a very different topic. And here, very clearly, the right-wing extremists are blurring this, deliberately blurring. They are being anti-immigrant by also being very racist in this whole issue. But that aside, this far-right propagandist Harrison Faulkner, now he brands himself as a journalist, and he hosts some sort of online show called Ratioed, and he hosts the Faulkner Show. And of course, this is a well-known outlet of much of this extreme right-wing nonsense, this propaganda, which he disseminates on a daily basis around social media. And this image has gone viral, sadly. And as I said, it's been seen at least 3.2 million times. And yeah, as it said, he's attempted to portray Sikhs as unhygienic. He's basically branding, he's blanketing the Sikh community as some sort of as unhygienic branch of immigrants who don't belong in Canada. But it is part of an ongoing large agenda, racist agenda that is spreading across Canada. And this, interestingly, what has been highlighted in the community, and many people have said, look, obviously this is part of an overall agenda. But recently, one popular far-right Canadian account, like Harrison Faulkner, they revealed that they'd actually been approached by Indian nationalists offering them money to target Sikhs with their hate, with propaganda. And this is something that the Sikh community have talked about for a long time, saying, look, we are aware that money is being channeled from the Indian government, ultimately being channeled through Indian intelligence services into social media activists, certainly the Hindutva side, to pay right-wingers in Canada, in the US, and indeed in the UK to spread anti-Sikh narrative, anti-Sikh propaganda like this, to try and tarnish, to taint, to smear the Sikh community. It's designed to turn the populations of these countries against the Sikh community. It's a very dangerous activity that's going on. People's lives are potentially being lost here. It is creating division. It is creating hate. And very clearly, incidents like this, and this photograph, which has clearly been photoshopped, are designed to turn communities, countries against the Sikh community. So we have to be aware of this. We've got to call it out whenever it is seen. And many on the right wing have said, oh, of course, this image is not photoshopped. It is a very good image, I have to say. But even I, with basic Photoshop skills, they're saying, look at the reflection in the car. It would take industrial grade software to be able to create such an image if it was fake. Well, I, as a basic user of Photoshop, can easily warp an image of a Sikh in an orange turban and warp it around a reflection. It's not hard to do with some basic capabilities in Photoshop. But the other side of the coin here is, okay, even if this image is real, this is a petrol station. This is an elderly gentleman. Logic firstly would say, why on earth would anybody, any human being, do an act like this in so public a place? Logic in itself would say there is no way that anybody would actually do this act in such a public place. It just wouldn't happen. If it did, however, then that gentleman either has a serious mental illness or he has a serious medical issue if he's forced into such a situation. In which case, why would you be spreading such hateful, vile propaganda about somebody who is so vulnerable? So whichever angle you look at this, it is deeply and morally wrong on every level. And we will call stuff out like this. If it is fake, then it should be called out. If it is indeed real, then it shouldn't be called out, or it should be called out because it is immoral to spread photographs of somebody clearly so vulnerable on that. So James, we on this channel have to pick up on stories like this, and we will report them, and we will report misinformation.
And it's funny that you bring up the medical or the mental health issues on that, because I actually posted earlier when I saw this before we went to air. I actually posted on there that, it's obviously been photoshopped. There is a video. This is actually a clip from a video or a screen grab from a video. And it's easy. You can even use AI to create videos like this. You don't even need skills in Photoshop or other software. But what I was saying, again, is exactly what you were saying, is that if this was indeed true, if this individual was actually doing such a thing in a public place, obviously, outside of a gas station, outside of a Tim Hortons restaurant, he could have used the facilities inside. Why didn't he? Well, there are cancer drugs. There are cancers that cause people to evacuate their bowels without notice. There are other illnesses and medications that could have caused something like this to happen, where he didn't want to relieve himself or it to be released in the gas station or in the restaurant where people are eating. I mean, come on, the most humiliating time of somebody's life, and they want to put it online and try to utilize it to separate people and to look at immigration. And that's one of the posts that I saw, is that, they're saying immigrants don't belong here. Look what they're doing. Well, that's bullshit. This is not a normal situation. I clearly think it was photoshopped, and if not, then there's a bigger story behind it that somebody just is disgusting for reporting on this individual at the most, downtrodden and most desperate time of their life. Like, how humiliating are people getting to try and create a divide in Canada? Like, I was just disgusted. I was just disgusted at this video and at the image. Like, it's just, I can't believe people did that.
Yeah, and I think you brought up a good point there. AI. These days, you cannot trust any image, even any video that you see these days. It's very easy to create fake images on every level. So, Mr. Harrison Faulkner, we're looking at you. Appalling on every level, whether it's fake or legitimate. This is not good. So, okay, let's move on. And my second story actually touches on a story that we covered yesterday about Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris's background as the attorney in California when she fought unnecessarily and unreasonably hard against the Sikh community, and particularly this discriminatory policy that anybody with a beard, and of course by that it incorporates all Sikhs, all Sikh gentlemen, that they cannot therefore work for the prison service because they would be required to wear respirators. And of course, she is claiming that they are unable to wear a respirator. Well, interestingly, in the last couple of days, major legal breakthrough. And this Californian anti-Sikh policy mandating shaving, being necessary to have a job like that, has been halted. A legal injunction has been successfully achieved. So it is a significant ruling in the United States District Court in California. And they've issued a preliminary injunction against the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, the CDCR, as we reported yesterday, regarding its enforcement of this policy that prohibits peace officers from wearing facial hair. Now, this policy, as has been reported and as we've said, has been deemed discriminatory, and it's legally been deemed discriminatory against religious practices and towards practicing Sikh men whose religion mandates that they cannot cut their hair, including their facial hair. Now, the civil rights complaint was originally filed in March to halt California's enforcement of the rule, saying that it does amount, of course, to religious discrimination for both Sikhs and Muslims and others who wear beards as an expression of their faith. Now, the court's order temporarily prohibits California from enforcing its no facial hair policy on peace officers who request to wear beards due to their religious beliefs. So it is a temporary injunction pending further legal clarification. The department must refrain from disciplinary actions, threats, demotions, forced use of accrued time off, involuntary reclassifications or transfers, etc., etc. In other words, the CDCR cannot enforce this policy in any way, shape or form. It cannot discriminate in any way, shape or form. And the court further ordered that the CDCR must engage in faith discussions with the affected peace officers to explore what accommodations can be made to their religious beliefs. This includes evaluating alternative respirators that allow for facial hair. And this interesting comes back to my question, James, yesterday, when what are actually the practical solutions to this? And here the court has ordered the CDCR to investigate these alternative solutions, that they obviously do exist and that they must be looked at in this situation. And whilst providing protection from hazards, these respirators must be designed to accommodate beards while still providing protection from hazards. They must also adjust staffing. They must adjust incident response and respiratory protection policies to align with the need for religious accommodations, and offering transfers to positions within CDCR that don't conflict with the officer's religious practices. And it has been noted by the Sikh community that this is a threat that comes from across the political landscape. So interestingly, the Sikh community have highlighted that this wasn't just a simple act of discrimination. It was driven by political reasons. And Kamala Harris, the current Vice President and Democratic presidential nominee, have fought against similar attempts to allow Sikhs to wear beards. So clearly, the accusation is very clearly being levelled at Kamala Harris here, saying this is basic discrimination, political and religious discrimination coming from you, Ms. Harris, for whatever reasons are driving your agenda. And they finish off their statement saying during her time as Attorney General in California that she argued to bar a Sikh from being hired as a California State Corrections Officer because she believed his beard would compromise his wearing a gas mask. Sikh activists have demanded that she apologises, and of course no such apology has since been forthcoming. So an interesting article, this, James. It's a big legal action that has been successful. An injunction has been achieved that now Sikhs can legitimately apply for jobs like this, that solutions, practical solutions, have now to be found. The CDCR have no choice. They have been given a legal slap, a very hard slap in the face by the California court saying, sorry, sort it out, find a solution.
And congratulations to all of those who were going ahead with this fight, and to the legal team that was representing those who've been discriminated against. Again, a huge victory, and of course it's not over yet, but I have a feeling that it's not going to change much in terms of where we're at now. I think that it will be thrown out as discriminatory policy that needs to be changed. So I don't think that policy will ever come back. So I think it's out and gone forever. Yeah.
Like we said yesterday, the precedent has been set in all the other services. This sat out as a very obvious anomaly. So, but the key issue here, I think, in this story is Kamala Harris. Clearly, there was an agenda there, and the accusations have been levelled since 2011 when she was heading up this case. Why? Why was she so unreasonably pushy in this case? It went beyond the duty of her role, as her job role as attorney. There was clearly a personal agenda there, and this does not bode well for her as a presidential nominee. What if she does reach the White House? Does this imply that there is going to be a behind-the-scenes anti-Sikh agenda in her administration? Let's hope not. We will see. We don't even know if she's going to win the presidency. We will see. But yeah, we'll keep on this story. We'll keep following this whole agenda. Okay, my final story then, this is, we've been talking about the caste system a lot in recent days, and there is quite a heated debate going on in India at this very moment in the Lok Sabha. And it all relates back to about 10 months ago, India did an experiment in one state, in Bihar state, in October. They actually, up until, well, certainly since partition, caste has never been a part of their census process. And in October, or certainly in 2023, Bihar state did an experiment where they did include, as part of their census, that people had to actually note down what their caste was. And this was designed to try and assess, okay, we actually don't know. What are the numbers in India? The strata, these different layers of the caste system, how many people are in each caste? And they did this. They actually ran this census. And shockingly, the survey found that over 2/3 of the state's population of over 130 million belonged to backward or marginalised communities. That's over 2/3 of the population belonged to the lower castes. And as part of the decades-old government affirmative action, marginalised communities have been categorised as backward, extremely backward, scheduled caste, the former untouchables, and scheduled tribes, the indigenous communities. And of course, India is one of the most unequal countries in the world, with the bulk of resources and jobs controlled by the upper caste, the privileged caste, and we do know this. Now, here's some interesting facts and figures. The Bihar caste census data showed that its dominant castes comprised just 15.5%. So this tiny minority, 15.5%, were of the upper caste, while its marginalised castes make up a staggering 84% of the state's population. 84% are basically marginalised people. Only 50% of government jobs and educational opportunities were reserved for them. So, whilst 84% of the population were marginalised, they only make up less than 50% of actual government jobs and educational jobs. 60% of the country's wealth is held by the richest 5% of citizens. So I'll just repeat that. So only 5% of India's citizens own over 60% of the country's wealth. An overwhelming majority of Indians belong to marginalised castes. And a 2021 Pew survey found this to be, this is across India roughly, they estimated that 69% of India's total population belonged to marginalised castes. Effectively 70%, nearly 3/4 of India belong to lower castes. Now, Modi and the BJP have been trying deliberately to blur these caste lines, and instead they've, certainly in that last election, they were trying to unite support for the BJP based not along caste lines. They blurred these castes. They deliberately tried to forget about the whole caste system and instead pushed this pro-nationalist Hindu agenda. They said, look, it doesn't matter if you're lower caste, let's forget about that inconvenient fact, but you're a Hindu. We must unite as Hindus. We must unite under the Indian flag because we're all Hindus. And this is where the marginalisation of the religious minorities have stemmed from, because the BJP said let's not promote the whole caste system. Let's forget that horrible inconvenience, that horrible thing that keeps 89% of you in Bihar, but certainly nearly 70% of Indians as slaves, effectively. Let's forget that. But we're all united together as Hindus. That's what we must push India forward on. And of course, Modi and the BJP don't like this whole caste system being brought up. They really hate this fact that people are now saying, hang on a second, let's take a look at this caste system that is dividing India so deeply, that is really undermining the whole of society. And the opposition have been the ones who, of course, have been pushing this. Say, no, we must look at this. We must hold a nationwide census across India. Let's try and identify across the 1.4 billion people of India. Let's work out, actually, who are the ruling class here? How small is this top layer of the pyramid here? Let's just actually lay out in black and white just how many people of India are being ruled by such a tiny minority, and why such a tiny minority of people in this upper highest echelons of the caste system, why have they got all the top jobs? Why are they ruling India? Why are they dominating the political class, the ruling class, the educational class? Whereas this vast majority, that huge base of the pyramid, are being held as slaves and are not having these top jobs. And this has been pushed, of course, by Rahul Gandhi of the Congress Party, who's now a leader of the opposition in the Lok Sabha after 10 years. Finally, we have an official leader of the opposition. He's pushing this, as indeed is most of the other coalition parties who formed a coalition against the BJP, and this India coalition who fought successfully against the BJP. And they've been, of course, pushing for this caste census. And they are making headway. They are making progress on this. And there is a very heated debate going in the Lok Sabha at the moment. And I don't know if it's going to win or not, if the debate will be successful, and this whole census will pass to look at identify the caste. Let's hope it is, because you cannot have a reasonable debate. You cannot have sensible policy debated and passed, and you cannot have proper law passed without knowing the facts, the basic fundamental facts of the makeup of India's population. And this caste system will always remain in place until we start taking a deep, close look at what is it. How many people actually are being slaves? It might wake a lot of people up to the fact that the vast majority, an estimated nearly 70% of India, are basically slaves, and they are not aware of it. James, it's worrying, isn't it?
It certainly is. And I mean, laws and government are supposed to represent the people for whom they protect and serve. And this obviously shows the disparity between the groups there that is way outdated and needs to change, just to put it politely for now. But
yeah, and we'll keep following this caste story, because clearly a lot of people are unhappy with it, particularly, of course, in the Sikh community.
Absolutely.
Who sit outside it and can see it for what it is. It's those who are prisoners, who are hostages, who are slaves in this system, who cannot see the bars that surround them, who cannot see the system that constrains them, that is restricting them. They don't want to fight it. They can't even see the evil that is surrounding them. So anyway. Okay, let us move on to our comment section. And as always, lots of great comments. Thank you, as always, to every single one of you who's commented. Unfortunately, we don't have enough time to cover every single comment, much as we would love to, because we do appreciate them. We do enjoy talking about them. So, okay, a couple of days ago, we talked about the great betrayal of Labour. Now, Janagra made the following comment and followed up his comment with some further comments. And this person said, "Great show of strength and solidarity by Sikhs. The majority of Sikhs want to get out of India and end slavery." Because, as I've just said, the Sikh community, they know what's going on in India. They can see it. There are none so blind as who cannot see in India. The Hindu population cannot see what's going on, but the Sikh population can. And of course, many of them fled the Punjab for many reasons, for economic reasons, but also because of the terrible societal straitjacket that was being imposed upon them. Now, S. Simba waded in to say, "How do you know about the majority? Do you live in Punjab? Slavery to whom?" Well, actually, very valid questions. And of course, I think it's very fair to ask that. How do you know? Well, he came straight back with a very robust response, or responses, to say, well, if you don't believe me, hold a vote. Let's hold a vote in Punjab. I have a gut feeling 80% of Sikhs are going to vote in favour of Khalistan, and I will honour the decision of the Punjabi people. So basically, it's the age-old argument that we throw out on a regular basis, James. Okay, if you don't believe us, let's find out. Let's, as we've just been talking about, let's gather some facts. How can you debate things when you don't know the actual fundamental basic facts? So let's find out the facts. Let's hold a referendum in Punjab. If you don't hold a referendum, For one, it's undemocratic not to do so, but secondly, what are you trying to hide? It basically means or implies that you know you will lose said referendum. And then, James, I'll pass to you in a second if we'll just cover this final comment, where Janagra follows up with another comment, which is very valid. Sikhs are slaves in Hindu Shaitan. If your country is a democratic country, let the people of Punjab and J&K decide what they want. Absolutely. And well, as I've just said, if the government of India won't allow a referendum because they know they'll lose it. And James, this is where you come in. Of course, democratic nations don't fear referenda. Democratic nations allow the right of self-determination. And of course, this commenter refers to Quebec, where, of course, I think you've had 2 referenda there, have you not, James?
Yes, we have. And the interesting thing to look at is that although Quebec is still a part of Canada, they also have some autonomy, and they have a different system of governance and law, different things that make them a little unique in Canada. But at the same time, they are part of Canada. We're proud to have Quebec and their culture as a part of our great nation. But we weren't afraid when they wanted to have their referendums to be independent. We've, as you said, we've seen that twice where it's happened, and they have the right to do so. And had they have won that, we would have respected their rights and their, their vote.
Absolutely. And here in the UK, we have exactly the same situation with Scotland. The British government, the United Kingdom government, were terrified of the Scottish nationalists because they wanted to break up the United Kingdom. We would therefore no longer be a united kingdom. We will be a disunited kingdom. But the Scottish nationalists demanded the right of self-determination. They said, look, we are a democratic nation. We must have a referendum. We must be given this right to voice our opinions. So the British government had no choice, although it was terrified of the outcome, just like India is terrified of a potential referendum in the Punjab. But as a democratic nation, it had no choice. Like in Canada with Quebec, the UK had no choice but to grant Scotland its right of self-determination. As it turned out, Scotland voted no. It was close, but it was a democratic vote that came out with a result, and both sides, to some degree, have respected the result. So the lesson to India is very clear from both Canada and the UK. You have no choice. If you are a democratic nation, you must hold a referendum in the Punjab. Otherwise, you will remain criticised forevermore as being undemocratic.
And I totally agree with the comment there about Modi never allowing the referendum to happen for Punjab. It's like he's trying to block one that's non-binding that's happening in other countries, let alone in his own. So, yeah, I definitely agree there that he'll never allow it.
He clearly has a lot to fear and is a lot to hide if he's trying to basically stop any outpouring of the Sikh voice. Okay, next set of comments. Nick Sranjat said, India has betrayed democracy, human rights and NATO for the last 100 years and falls into Russia's lap, profiting from the war, whereas Sikhs stood with the British Army. They fought for democracy in the world wars. Sikhs also aligned with democratic and human rights values of the West and integrated with society and supported people who support democratic values irrespective of religion, caste, race. Sikhs say all of us in the human race are one. Absolutely spot on. Yeah. Totally agree with this comment. And Bob Singh replies, Angus and James, great support. Thanks, a pleasure. Thank you for your comment. Now you should send this message again and again to the UK leadership. Sacrifice of Sikhs for England and betrayal of Hindus to every country, much more. Now this point raises a point that I raise on a very regular occasion because it really ignites my own anger. Because what the Sikhs have contributed to this country I'm referring to the UK, what the Sikhs have contributed in blood, in spent blood on the battlefield, and also just in general society, what the Sikh community have contributed since 1850, since the end of the Sikh Empire, has been immeasurable. And what have the British done in return? Betrayed them at every turn point. And this is why that certainly I personally will fight for Khalistan, because I feel the British nation has a debt of honour to the Sikh community. Ever since 1850, we integrated the Sikh community into our army to honour them in honour of their courage and their bravery, and they have served with sterling service, and we keep betraying them. We have not repaid this debt of honour yet. We owe the Sikh community a debt of honour for the lives that they have given for our nation that has now become our combined nation. And for me, the best compensation to the Sikh community is to help them achieve their own homeland. They deserve their own homeland, a homeland that we, the British, removed from them in 1850. We have a moral obligation to help them get it back. And I will certainly, from my part, do my bit to fight for that very aspiration, James.
Yeah, and the same on this side of the water, Angus. We can't say enough about the input and contributions of the Sikhs in Canada. And again, the sacrifices that they made to, further the benefit and the growth of our nation. So,
yes. So thank you for that comment, highlighting something that, we obviously feel very strongly about. Grewal Sequinder, only people of the Banana Republic made that kind of remark that Sikhs will not be able to govern Khalistan. And this, of course, refers to a comment that was made the other day where one of our contributors, our regular contributors, I have to say a very good contributor, makes some very sensible comments, but did comment that they did not believe that Sikhs could govern Khalistan, or certainly the Punjab, successfully. And of course that evoked a lot of comments to the contrary. And this person, Grewal, says, I can guarantee that within a month all Indian states will be praying to be a part of Khalistan. Well, actually, this is quite possible. I think if and when Khalistan happens, I think it will be such a success once it's up and running that a lot of other Indian states will say, hang on a second, we'd like to be part of this success story. So we've talked about the dominoes falling in India and the breakup of India, the potential breakup of India. If the Punjab does manage to successfully break away and become Khalistan, it is likely that others will follow. Will they want to be a part of Khalistan? Well, would J&K, for example, like to merge part of Khalistan? I don't know. That's a debate for those in the Sikh community, whether they would wish that or not. But yeah, James, I think that comment, makes a very clear point.
Absolutely, and I think it just speaks volumes within itself. So.
And the final comment from Jaswant Singh says, Hindus were slaves for more than 1,000 years. Actually, I think it's even longer than that. And that is the reason why India is in such chaos and there's no justice. Sikhs have ruled the Punjab absolutely flawlessly, with justice for all, and has been recognised as the best rule in the world. So this follows the same point. How absurd and naive it is to say that Sikhs can't rule Punjab. Yes, I couldn't summarise that any better, James. I think that says it all.
Absolutely, and I just laugh because they're talking about justice for all, and they're kind of insinuating that India has that.
Sadly, and we do laugh, but it is serious. Unfortunately, we
absolutely
have
it is.
Yeah, we have held up. It is, but yeah, on a daily basis, we highlight these examples of injustice, of the failure of the rule of law in India. This appalling a raft of anti-democratic legislation that's been instituted, this recent change in Indian law that has taken colonial law, and added steroids to it to make it even worse than it was even when they used to criticise colonial law. So, yes, anyway, but time has beaten us once again. We must wrap things up. But, of course, you have been watching Perspectives. Please don't forget to keep those comments coming in. They are brilliant. They'll make very interesting reading. They make great debates for myself and James to talk about. So do keep those comments coming in. Don't forget you can, of course, message us directly. You can even send us voice notes or even video messages to our email address. That's message@satlugetv.com. And, of course, you can highlight any news items that many of you have done that you would like us to cover as well. So thank you very much indeed for your emails. Thank you very much indeed for your comments. But we must wrap it up there. It is goodbye from me, and it is goodbye from James.
Goodbye, everyone. Stay safe.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.